Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing an article from National Public Radio titled, Freemasons Say They're Needed Now More Than Ever. So why are their ranks dwindling?
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual cat of four, I'll call them characters. We have very worshipful brother David Colbeth, who's a member of King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. Jarrod Dunham, a member of Penticton 147 in the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. Stephen Chung from Prince Charles Lodge number 153 up in Kelowna, British Columbia. And myself, I'm a member of Mill Creek. My name is Matthew Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek number 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. So in casting about for an article to read today for today's episode, David came across this piece which I remember hearing actually on NPR when it came out back in 2020 about Masonry. That's titled "Freemasons Say They're Needed Now More Than Ever. So why are their ranks dwindling?" It's written by Christiana Silva, and I'm sure David will gladly provide a link to it in the show notes because he's that kind of thorough guy. So I guess, David, what caught your eye about this article? What made you think it would be worth discussing?
Well, I think initially it was because we were just discussing that article on is Freemasonry dying or no, I can't think of the title. I'm just out of my mind blank. Freemasonry dying or refining. Thank you. And so I thought, well, this is a different slant on that idea of what's happening to Freemasonry. And of course, it was mid-pandemic. And so it was an interesting article to read about what an outsider, if you will, thinks of what's happening with Freemasonry. And I think it's valuable for us to always look at those ideas and see what other people are thinking about us and what we should or shouldn't be doing. And I've got a lot of highlights and a lot of comments about their opinions. And but I think mainly, again, it was I think it related a little bit to what because the article talks about that, which many articles talk about and many Masons talk about. Oh, our numbers are dwindling. Is it even relevant? Are we relevant anymore? And so I think it relates back to what we were just talking about, that I think it was a great article and a great discussion we had about Freemasonry is not dying, it's refining. And I think a lot of us, and also from the Grand Master, I just was listening to the Grand Master's message from British Columbia, Yukon, and I think we're seeing the same numbers, same ideas, that there's a little bit of a resurgence of interest in Freemasonry. Now, I wouldn't say it's an explosion like there was maybe in the late 40s or mid 40s after World War II, but there certainly is a renewed interest, or something's happening. Maybe it's a combination of renewed interest as well as maybe some marketing that's happening and some other things, internet and things that is more widely available. Masonry and information about Masonry is more widely available. So I think there's a multitude of things happening.
Well, I think that I guess if you want to call it the promotion around the internet, the Grand Lodge of British Columbia has that website that is designed or geared towards those seeking Freemasonry, and it's called Begin You. And if memory serves me correctly, numbers were over 800 inquiries across our province for interest in joining lodge, and that's over 800 that they received inquiries on and sent out to lodges. I know that we've received a few. I know that we've received 3 inquiries through our Google page and 2 through our Facebook page in the last year. So is it dying? I don't know. I think people get that impression because of the numbers, but really, when you think about when the numbers surged, and this article talks about it in 1959, where roughly 4.5% of all Americans were members. I mean, we've talked about that being, a post-war thing where people were in the military and they had that comradeship and they had that feeling of brotherhood, and then they left that, and they're, now they're veterans and they're looking for those types of things. And there was big influx into Masonry after the war. So now you look at the age of them and they're dying off. Natural deaths. It's unfortunately, yep, gonna have a kick at our numbers, right? But is that due to, is it an illusion? Is it what people are seeing as mass numbers dropping? But they're not being told that, we just had 5 guys die in 6 months, right? They're just seeing numbers. So I think it's a little presumptuous to say we're dying, but I think more like you say, Dave, we're refining, and if our numbers are going down, it could be due to death or illness, right? So things to think about.
I'm gonna throw it out there again this time. We're not dying, we're right sizing. I always contend that the worst thing that happened to our fraternity was that influx of members after World War II. Because if you look at the statistics for up here in BC and the Yukon, our peak hit in 63, and we've been losing members ever since 1964. So we always lament this fact, like, why do we need to be the biggest organization out there? Why is numbers the thing that we are so concerned about? Why do we have to have 4% of the population being Freemasons? Why is that important to us? Why is it not the fact that we are doing what we're supposed to do, improving ourselves, and not worrying about, oh my God, we've got the largest lodge or the biggest building? Yeah, I know, but it's still like, I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. Is that if our numbers keep dwindling, that what we should be worried about is when the number hits 0. When the last Freemason dies, then there's the problem. But it's like, if we have, like, here in the Okanagan, in the greater, I'm going to use the term greater Okanagan. So from Salmon Arm in the north down to the border in the south, there is less than 500,000 people that live here. So based on that, should we have a dozen or more lodges? Is it maybe we shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 lodges in the South Okanagan here? Maybe that's the right number. And instead of lamenting lodges closing, we should just be going, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have had so many in the first place because we obviously couldn't support them. Yeah, I will get off my soapbox now.
No, stay there. I have questions.
Okay.
Stay there. He wants to knock you off that soapbox.
No. Let's put a second one up. We'll sit down and have a discussion.
As long as yours is smaller than mine, I'm happy. No.
Size doesn't matter.
Well, no. According to this article.
So that's a good question. What is the right size? What is the right size of a lodge? What's the right size of the number of members? Is there a right size? I don't think there is. I think I would agree with you in that we have this image of the right size being hundreds of members in lodge. And we've built these structures around the idea of having these big membership lodges. And that's maybe not the way it should have ever been.
No. This idea that you can't swing a cat in a crowd without hitting a Freemason, although really it should be a goat, but whatever. But the whole concept of it bothers me when we think, because they always trot out, the famous Freemasons, the presidents, the prime ministers, the actors, the musicians and stuff. And I'm like,
it's been like 30 years or 40 years since there's been a
Gerald Ford, last Freemason president you guys had. Sad that I know that. But really, honestly, like, why are we so concerned about it? Like, I think that's our biggest problem is that we're focusing too much on the numbers.
Because we have these big buildings to support.
Then get rid of them.
Amen. right?
Get rid of, as I've said in past podcasts, get rid of your charitable foundations. They should be run by other people. I'm not saying that charity is a bad thing, but I'm just saying it's not something we're good at. It's sucking up so much time and money from what we really should be doing.
So I've got a pressing question I've been wanting to ask, and it's somewhat related to this, but not related to this. And so I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. And this is very, it kind of relates maybe to the last show we had about dress and stuff. But if we don't need these buildings and these big things, these structures and these organizations or organized places to meet, and where did we originally meet, or where did the previous Masons come from 100, 150 years ago? They met in, they met in a public house, right?
100 years ago, they had their own lodge halls. You're going back even further.
Okay, whatever. but they had a public upstairs in the public house, which is kind of like the community center, if you want to think about it in our terms these days. But so they didn't have necessarily a formalized, east and west and furniture and all that kind of stuff. It was just an informal place where they met, and they were eating while they were doing it. So I thought, why couldn't we have our lodge meetings in our dining room and just have, and you could certainly do your degree work, maybe in a more formal lodge room, nicer place to do it. But what prevents us from having our meeting sitting around tables, enjoying ourselves, and we could still do everything? You could have an altar, you could have all the things, all the furniture of a lodge.
We do that. It's called the table lodge.
Well, no, that's the thing, is we've formalized this process and call it something else because we want to move out of the lodge room, which we call the ceremony room. We want to move out of that space into this more social space. But that's where we came from. Supposedly, so the stories all tell us that. Why can't we go back to that? Why can't we be in the dining room and have lodge?
Well, I would argue that most people don't have a dining room anymore.
Okay.
But I agree that why can we not have a dining room or a room that we, I know that I've read that it used to be the entered apprentices who their job was after lodge to go around with a broom and sweep up the chalk markings on the floor.
Sure.
So I like that idea that, maybe we shouldn't be so concerned about having a permanent lodge room so much as a space where we can gather and do the work that we want to do. Once again, it's focusing on the work, not the space, because any space can be made to be a lodge room.
Yeah. And again, what is a lodge room? It's a gathering of men in a particular fashion. So that there's
a lodge room is as wide east to west, north, the whole.
Yeah. Right. But any room could be that, like you just said. So,
right.
Matt is displaying. You have to.
With the carpet,
if you're not watching
YouTube,
if you're not watching YouTube or the video on Spotify, you haven't seen Matt demonstrate.
Wasn't that? It was like a few months ago. We did that whole. There was a thing about the silent lecture. How large is the lodge room, and the guy points to the sky, and he points to where. I don't remember how it went now, but
when they were,
I was trying to reference a previous episode.
Yeah.
But could you imagine? I'm thinking in my mind, I'm in the junior warden right now, and so maybe in a couple of years I'll be my master again. It's 11 years later. If I were to go to the membership and say, "Hey guys, we're going to have lodge in our dining room. We're not going to use the ceremony room. We're not going to use the lodge room except for degree work." Can you imagine the hate and contempt that I would receive from?
Here's a question: would your constitution and regulations, or whatever you guys call it down there, allow you to do that?
It just has an address where you meet. It just has an address where you meet. It doesn't say which room you meet in.
So when you say your dining, you're talking about the dining room in the lodge hall.
Yeah.
It's not your lodge. Okay, so I see.
It's next door. I mean, we have a separate dining room and a separate ceremony room. I call it, for rental purposes. I'm the rental manager too, so I call it our dining room or our event venue, and then also the ceremony room. But yeah, the lodge room, which is carpeted and all the fancy stuff and all that. And then there's the dining hall, which is just the plastic tables and stuff. But if you were to arrange it in a manner that is more like what you're referring to, the table lodge format, the kind of U-shaped or whatever, and a little bit more formalized, just a little bit, so that you could see each other. You're not sitting around tables. But why couldn't we do that?
I don't know. I'd have to look into our constitution regulations to see if you could or could not do that. That's the only reason that I could see for not doing it would be that the rules say we can't.
And that would certainly provide, because we already do in our lodge room, we already have we call it shrink the lodge. In the middle of the meeting, we pause, essentially go to a status that allows us to move about the lodge, and we go to the center or go to a section of the lodge. Everybody's on the one level. We have a discussion. That's where we have our education discussion. And then we come back from that space. It provides from an intimate discussion. And then we go back from that and we finish up the process of lodge. But who's to say we couldn't just have that discussion as soon as, now we'd have to excuse the visitors, of course, the inquirers that come for the supper beforehand, social time beforehand, but at 7:30 when we tile the lodge, that's a perfect opportunity to purge the space and to exit the visitors, and it's just Masons in the room, and we still have doors on it. There's doors on a room. We can still have a tiler outside. I don't see, other than the formality, I don't see a problem.
I mean, Summerland Lodge met at the Oddfellows Hall for however long.
So lodge near here, the meets in the Eagles building.
Yeah. But they have do they meet in the dining room or do they meet in their, because the Eagles and some places like that have a ceremony room of sorts, right?
I don't know. I've never been.
In Summerland, they would set up it was the Rebecca's Hall, and it was a hall that they would set up with the furniture for the lodge, and then they would take it down and set up tables afterwards in the same space for refreshment afterwards.
Yeah. But why can't we have that? Why do we have to change that? Right? Why do we have to?
Sorry.
No. It's go ahead.
My question was, I guess my question would be is, would that allow us? Does that enhance what we do, detract from what we do, or is it just we're doing the same thing just differently? Like, because I mean, the whole point of the article was that our membership is shrinking for reasons, and
how dare you bring this conversation back to the article?
I know I'm trying to. It's like hold on a second. But the question, I guess, because I like that, and there's nothing that says that maybe there is a group of Freemasons who would form a lodge and do that. But once again, and that would appeal to maybe a small specific group of people, and that's fine. It's not going to increase membership technically, but once again, why are we so worried about being the largest organization out there?
Well, one of the complaints about that is that you come to a meeting, they open lodge, they pay the bills, go home.
Well, yeah, but you can do the same thing around a kitchen, around your dining room table, and it's still the same boring meeting.
You could, but at least the food is part of it, right? My thought is not like you have a meal and you stop and then have the meeting. It's just you're eating and then it's part of it almost.
Yeah, my argument is that if your lodge is just coming together, paying the bills and leaving, then you're not doing Freemasonry, and you might as well just give it in, throw in the towel, and call it a day.
Yeah, if a guy wanted to get up and go get a cup of coffee or go get, I know it seems sacrosanct because that's not how we do it normally now, right?
But once again, and the article, now I think it was this article that talked about, the fundamentalist Freemasons. I hate, that will, if we were to allow, open up our doors to a larger group of people, that we would splinter. And I don't necessarily not that I'm saying that splintering is a good idea, but this is another example of that, is that I don't see any reason, if there were a bunch of Freemasons that wanted to do that idea where they would rather sit around the dining room table, have a meal, and do lodge that way, why they shouldn't be able to form a lodge to do that. Because then you'll get the guys that want the serious and sitting and don't, you can't get up and get coffee while someone's, then they will join a lodge that is more, I don't want to use the term ritualistic, but that their decorum is at a higher standard than sitting around a dining room table, having a meal together and doing Freemason. Because the important part of this isn't how you do it, is that you should be practicing Freemasonry. And the format should be set up so that you have a group of people that are doing it together. So,
doing Freemasonry, that is the question.
Well,
what is doing Freemasonry?
That is the fundamental question.
Yeah.
What is the main what is Freemasonry's reason for being? And I mean, ask 10 Freemasons, you'll get 10 different answers. And I think that partially that might be part of the problem too, is that you can't get everyone to agree on why we exist.
Well, I think to pull it back to the article, I think the article talked about that, is that it's just like you said, it's a safe space, right? It's generally the idea, it's generally men only, and it's a safe space where we can come together and have conversations and relate to each other, or relate to like-minded people and things like that.
I suppose, but I mean, you can, but you can find safe spaces anywhere of groups of like-minded people.
And I think that was what the article talked about, is that I'll quote it, refreshing to spend time with people who aren't arguing. And people, it's that Hodap said that, but you can kind of expect what's going to happen. You're not necessarily, we might have, I've heard of other articles, not just this one, but there's other articles I've said that while we may have discussions about things, generally we leave on a civil manner. You could kind of agree to disagree or whatever. And it's a unique space to be able to have the discussions without being divisive.
Right. Or contentious.
Generally. Not always, but generally.
Not always.
We are human.
And I know, but sorry, Matt.
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, because I know in the article it talks about, that, when you can spend 2 minutes on Google and find out everything you need to know about Freemasonry. I would argue that no, you can't. You can find out a lot, but you can't find out all the secrets.
Yeah, that's why I said, what are the secrets?
Yeah, well, and that's it. Well, and the mystery, like part of what keeps me going back to Freemasonry as many times as I have gotten frustrated with it is the ritual, and for me, the tradition. And I think we've lost. Tradition is a bad word nowadays, because people, we think of traditions as being stuffy and outdated, and they may be, but it's maybe I'm just having a post Queen Elizabeth moment, but there's something to be said about being able to go to a place that, for me, that like my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather have sat and done similar, if not the same ritual in a similar, and so that there's a comfort in that that we're and admittedly it may be a tradition that is outdated, but I don't know where I'm going with this point. I've totally lost my train of thought.
But only outdated because we think, some people think that we need to modernize. And I would disagree that we need to modernize. Matt may have an opinion about modernization of the ritual, but
what is modernization?
Yeah.
I mean, because if you think about it, Freemasonry, when it first started, was a radical concept. That you would have a group of men from various, admittedly still reasonably high social standings, but various social standings coming together and to discuss new concepts. Was a radical idea, whereas today we consider that normal. Like, how often do you get together with your friends or at Thanksgiving and discuss, topics that would be, I don't know, that would be, out, like how often, I don't know about you guys, but like how often do you guys discuss concepts like space and life in the universe? Like, these are things that we consider, commonplace now. So should we be getting together and discussing, string theory? Like, God, I hope not, because I don't understand it.
But there's certainly conversations that I have with my brothers, whether it's not so much in the lodge itself. And that's why it's really more the meeting. We call it meeting after the meeting, a meeting after the meeting after the meeting after the meeting, depending on where you are, positioning, those are the conversations that are usually more valuable and hopefully are more interesting about ideas and concepts versus sitting in the middle of the lodge. We try in our version of the Shrink the Lodge, we try to have some of those deep thought discussions, but it can be difficult because it's not a kind of a relaxed environment. You're still in the lodge room, you're still, in uncomfortable chairs, and that as soon as this is done, you're going to go back and finish up business and close. And versus maybe sitting in either on the porch and the outside or in the lounge in the comfy chairs or whatever your relaxed format. And as the statement of this podcast, that having a casual conversation and just enjoying each other and talking about ideas. Yeah, I'm not in the group of guys that talk about string theory, but there are a couple of guys that I know, they're physicists, that I try to have a little morsel to drive a conversation when I see him.
When we used to do our more light nights here in Kelowna, it's amazing the different things that they'd want to talk about. Some of them want to talk about string theories or esotericism or modern day lodge, and some guys just want to delve into the different pieces of ritual, right? But whatever it is they desire, that's what we endeavor to deliver, right? So should we be talking about it? Sure, if that's what they want to talk about, right? And there are some lodges that I know that are right into certain types of education pieces, and that's what they want to see, and so that's what they're expected to deliver, right? But those guys join those lodges for those reasons, I believe.
Yep, and we all expect different things out of Masonry, and as I've said before, your Masonry and my Masonry don't have to be the same thing, and that's okay. So on that extremely wise note, if I may say so myself, I think it's about time that we wrap up this episode. We'll continue this conversation, I think, in our next episode of the podcast. Excuse me. Sorry about that. We'll continue this conversation in our next episode. Our conversation here of the article "Freemasons Say They're Needed Now More Than Ever, So Why Are Their Ranks Dwindling?" by Christiana Silva is an NPR piece that David will link, and we'll have more discussion on it next time. So on behalf of Stephen and Jarrod and David and myself, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.